Picture this. It is 1917.
Okay, I'm there.
You are just completely exhausted, lying in this, crowded, dimly lit room.
Sounds miserable.
It is. And someone nearby is making this absolutely deafening, just grating noise. And you just can't take it anymore.
Right, you're at your breaking point.
Exactly. So you grab a thick, military-issued wool sock, you march over, and you shove it directly down their throat.
Wow. That sounds incredibly violent.
It does, right. Except, you aren't actually silencing a person. You're silencing a machine.
Ah, okay. That makes a lot more sense.
Right. And in doing so, you're basically giving birth to one of the most recognizable phrases in the English language.
It really is. We say it all the time.
Yeah, but I want to ask you, the listener, have you ever actually stopped to think about what the "it" is when you tell someone to, put a sock in it?
I mean, probably not. We just hurl this phrase at each other in the heat of the moment.
Exactly, like when we desperately want someone to quiet down. But the literal mechanics of the idiom are entirely hidden from us today. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. It is a perfect example of a phrase that has completely shed its original physical context.
Totally lost it over time.
Yeah. When we trace the origins of put a sock in it, we are essentially digging up a technological fossil.
A technological fossil. I like that.
Because the most convincing evidence we have points to this remarkably specific, honestly bizarre collision of early acoustic technology, the brutal realities of World War I, and, a massive surplus of military hosiery.
Which is just a wild combination. But so to figure out how we got here, we can't just guess at the object. We have to look at the timeline.
Right. The timeline is key.
And the timeline starts in print.
Exactly. When linguists want to pin down a phrase, they always look for the earliest recorded print mentions.
Makes sense. Where else do you start?
And for this specific expression, the trail leads straight to early 20th century Britain.
Okay, so post-Victorian era, basically.
Yeah. One of the very first times we see put a sock in it, committed to paper, is in 1919. It was in a London literary magazine called The Athenaeum.
Wait, hold on a second. The Athenaeum.
Yep.
If the very first time we see this phrase in print is in a highbrow London literary magazine right after the First World War, why are we assuming it has anything to do with gritty soldiers?
That's a fair question.
Right. Like, couldn't this just be wealthy, aristocratic Londoners coming up with a posh insult? Maybe they were getting annoyed by street musicians outside their windows and telling them to put a sock in it.
That is a completely logical assumption based just on the source alone.
Right.
But you have to look closely at exactly how the magazine printed the phrase. The Athenaeum didn't just casually drop the expression into a sentence expecting their readers to understand it.
They didn't.
No, they actually had to explicitly define it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the 1919 edition literally reads, and I'm quoting here, put a sock in it, meaning leave off talking, singing, or shouting.
Oh, wow. I see.
Yeah.
It's like when a legacy newspaper today publishes an earnest, slightly awkward article explaining what it means to be left on read.
Yes, exactly.
Or like explaining what a burner account is to, an older demographic.
Yeah.
The very fact that they are defining it for their audience proves that the phrase didn't originate with them.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is that print culture is almost always a delayed echo of the spoken word.
A delayed echo. That's a great way to put it.
When the cultural elite feel compelled to, catalog a phrase and explain it to their distinguished readers, it means the expression has already gained massive traction.
In a completely different subculture.
Exactly. It hasn't saturated standard English yet, but it's bubbling up so aggressively that they just can no longer ignore it.
That makes total sense.
And we see this cataloging trend continue just a few years later. The website Phrase Finder notes that the phrase gets officially documented again in a 1925 book.
Okay, what book was that?
It was by Edward Fraser and John Gibbons, titled Soldier and Sailor Words and Phrases.
A dedicated military dictionary.
Right. And their definition aligns perfectly with the literary magazine. They defined it as leave off making a noise, stop talking.
Okay, so the print history tells us that by 1919, polite society was just discovering a phrase that was already deeply ingrained in military vernacular.
Exactly. It was already everywhere in the military.
Which means if we really want to find the true origin, we have to leave the quiet reading rooms of London.
We do. We have to step into the reality of the military.
Right. We have to look at where these soldiers were gathered in massive numbers right before 1919.
We have to look at the First World War.
Man, that's heavy.
It is. And the trail takes us to a very specific, honestly intensely vivid location.
Okay.
We actually have a slightly earlier use of the phrase, recorded before the literary magazine even printed it.
Wait, really? We do?
Yeah. It was uncovered in a book published in 1917, right in the thick of the war.
I remember looking at this source. The title of this book is just incredible. It's called Happy Though Wounded, the book of the 3rd London General Hospital.
Yeah. And the history of that specific hospital is deeply moving all on its own.
It really is.
Before the war began, the massive building had actually functioned as an orphanage.
Wow.
But when the fighting broke out, the sheer unimaginable scale of casualties meant the military had to rapidly requisition large buildings everywhere. They just needed space.
So this sprawling orphanage was quickly transformed into the 3rd London General Hospital.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just a local clinic, This facility was treating wounded soldiers brought back from the front lines from all across the British Empire.
Yes, from everywhere.
You have to imagine the sheer density of humanity packed into that space.
It's hard to even picture.
Thousands of men from vastly different backgrounds, regions, accents, and social classes, all thrust together into this requisitioned building.
It was an environment defined by pain, crowding, and relentless noise.
Right.
And that 1917 book, Happy Though Wounded, is such a vital historical document because it isn't a dry, clinical, medical text.
It wasn't written by doctors.
Well, it was a compilation. It had articles, photographs, and cartoons looking back over the hospital's 6-year history.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it was written and illustrated by both the hospital staff and the patients themselves.
So it was basically their collective diary.
Yes, exactly.
A way to process the trauma, document their daily lives, and kind of capture the shared culture they were building inside those walls.
And hitting right inside the pages of that collective diary is the crucial quote.
Let's hear it.
It sets a scene that reads, "Put a sock in it, Fusiliers. Hereupon a sudden and awful silence. The night sister has entered the ward."
Man, that scene is so cinematic.
It really paints a picture.
Let's really look at what is happening there. You have a massive, echoing hospital ward late at night. The wounded Fusiliers are being loud.
Right, maybe keeping the others awake?
They're probably trying to blow off steam, maybe singing, arguing, or just making a racket to distract themselves from the grim reality of where they are.
Almost certainly.
And then the ultimate authority figure arrives.
Yeah, the night sister.
Right, and this isn't just someone asking for quiet. The night sister in a WWI trauma center would have been an incredibly formidable presence.
Oh, absolutely.
She is managing infection, injury, and sheer chaos. She demands absolute order.
Yes.
It's like having the ultimate strict resident advisor in a college dorm, but with the intensely high stakes of a war hospital.
That's a great analogy.
So when she steps into the room, another soldier doesn't politely ask the Fusiliers to quiet down.
No time for that.
Right, he issues a panicked, desperate warning. "Put a sock in it, Fusiliers."
And the result is immediate, awful silence.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly illustrates why this specific environment is such a powerful incubator for slang.
How so?
Well, a polite, multisyllable request for quiet simply does not work in a chaotic military ward.
Right, nobody's going to listen to that.
Exactly. You need language that is fast, snappy, and instantly understood. You need a command that cuts through the noise.
Slang becomes a psychological survival tool in that kind of high-pressure density.
Absolutely.
But, this brings us to the most glaring logical gap in the story.
Okay, what's that?
We have the print sources from 1919 and 1925.
Right.
We have the hospital quote from 1917. So we know the when and the where.
We do.
We know it gained massive traction among soldiers during the First World War. But we still haven't answered what the it is.
Ah, yes. The mysterious it.
Because honestly, you can't literally shove a wool sock into a Fusilier's mouth.
Well, you could try, but that's going to start a massive brawl in the middle of a trauma ward.
Exactly. So who or what were these soldiers actually shouting at originally? When the phrase was first coined, what was the imaginary object receiving the sock?
To answer that, we have to shift our focus entirely. We have to look away from military history for a moment and look at the history of technology.
Okay. Pivoting to tech.
Specifically, a device that was incredibly common at the time, which brings us to the gramophone theory.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because What machine in 1917 was loud enough to annoy a whole barracks of exhausted men and had a mouth big enough to fit a military-issued sock?
The gramophone.
The gramophone.
Invented by a man named Emil Berliner, who patented the idea way back in 1887.
Oh, so it had been around for a while.
Yeah, this machine was the direct mechanical forerunner to the modern turntable.
Okay.
But to understand why a sock was necessary, we have to understand the physics of how Berliner's machine actually worked.
Because there were no microchips here.
None.
There were no digital files, no Bluetooth connections, and certainly no electronic amplifiers. This is a purely mechanical process.
Entirely physical. The gramophone worked by dragging a needle over tiny physical grooves etched into a flat disc.
Like a record.
Exactly like a record. And as the needle passed over the variations in the groove, it vibrated. Those tiny mechanical vibrations were transferred directly to a diaphragm.
And when that diaphragm vibrated, it created sound waves.
You've got it.
But here's the catch. A vibrating diaphragm on its own doesn't move a lot of air.
No, it doesn't.
The sound it makes is relatively tiny. Like if you just had the needle and the diaphragm, you would have to press your ear right up to the machine to hear the music.
So to make the sound loud enough to hear across a crowded room, Berliner utilized an acoustic horn.
A giant metal horn.
Right. The sound waves created by the diaphragm were pushed out through this massive flaring metal cone.
It's just like cupping your hands around your mouth when you want to shout across a field.
Exactly like that.
If you just yell normally, the sound waves scatter in every direction and lose their energy. But if you cup your hands, you funnel those sound waves.
You focus the acoustic energy.
Right, and you project it forward. The gramophone horn did exactly that, but made of metal and on a much, much larger scale. It was an incredibly effective acoustic amplifier.
It was so effective that by the time the First World War broke out in 1914, Berliner's gramophone was no longer a rare, expensive novelty.
It was everywhere.
Yeah, it had become a widely known, mass-produced piece of technology.
But this piece of technology had one critical, highly infuriating design flaw.
Oh, yes, it did.
And this is the key to the whole mystery. The early mechanical gramophone had absolutely no volume button. None whatsoever.
Like, imagine a physical giant version of your smartphone speaker, but with absolutely no volume down button.
That's awful.
The needle drops, the diaphragm vibrates, and the massive acoustic horn blasts the marching band music or the scratchy vocal recording at maximum unadjustable volume until the record finally ends.
It is an all-or-nothing technological experience.
Exactly.
And this is where the history of technology crashes directly into the reality of the WWI soldier.
Right.
We know from historical sources that gramophones would have been incredibly common in military barracks.
Really? They brought them to the war.
Yeah, they were relatively cheap. They were portable, and honestly, they were one of the very few forms of available entertainment to distract the men from the grim reality of trench warfare. Okay, so you have a mass influx of incredibly loud, volumeless music machines into crowded military living quarters.
Exactly. And what else do you have an endless, heavily issued supply of in a military barracks?
Thick, compressible woolen socks.
Exactly.
It's a perfect storm.
Now, linguists are always careful to note that you can never definitively prove the exact 100% origin moment of a slang phrase.
Sure, we don't have a time machine to go back and witness the very first soldier who did it.
Right, but the physical evidence and the psychological reality align perfectly here.
Because the mechanics of it are wonderfully crude. If you are sitting in a room and the gramophone is blaring some tinny repetitive tune at top volume, you can't just swipe down on a screen.
No, you can't.
You have to physically intervene to stop the acoustic amplification. You have to literally gag the machine.
Yes, you need something to block the pathway of the sound waves before they can flare out of the horn.
And a piece of wood won't work.
No, it will just rattle against the metal. You need something soft, dense, and readily available.
Like a sock.
So a soldier grabs a crumpled up woolen sock and shoves it right down the throat of the acoustic horn.
It is brilliant in its simplicity.
It really is.
And it perfectly explains the exact preposition we use. You aren't putting a sock on it. You aren't putting a sock around it. You are putting a sock in it, down the throat of the horn.
This raises an important question about human nature, really. It shows how human beings constantly invent highly physical solutions to solve technological annoyances.
Totally.
The machine lacks a volume control, so the user forces one upon it using whatever is lying around the barracks.
So what does this all mean? Well, just put yourself in that environment for a moment. Imagine the sheer visceral annoyance that drives a person to invent a new phrase.
Yeah, try to picture it.
You are a completely exhausted soldier. You've been marching through the mud, you are freezing, you are terrified, and you have finally been rotated off the front lines.
You just want a sleep.
You get back to the barracks, drop your gear, and close your eyes. And your bunkmate, who apparently isn't tired at all, decides this is the perfect moment to drop the needle on a gramophone and blast a record.
At maximum unadjustable volume.
Right. You are not going to politely ask him to turn it down, because he physically can't. You're going to yell at him to shut the machine up using the exact crude mechanical method that every single soldier in that room knows works.
You yell across the barracks, put a sock in it.
Exactly. The combination of deeply irritated soldiers and highly inconsiderate barrack mates makes this the most obvious, elegant explanation.
What begins as a literal set of physical instructions for operating early audio equipment slowly morphs into a universal command.
Because it's such a powerful image, right?
It really is. The physical reality of muffling the gramophone horn perfectly aligns with the psychological reality of human irritation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When we are stressed or annoyed or just pushed to our absolute limits, our language strips away all the polite abstraction.
We don't mince words.
Right. We reach for the most direct, visceral imagery available. The literal action of muffling a loud, annoying machine seamlessly became the perfect metaphor for muffling a loud, annoying person.
It's beautiful in a grumpy sort of way.
It is. The phrase was so effective and honestly so satisfying to say that it just bled out of the barracks.
It hitched a ride with the wounded soldiers to the 3rd London General Hospital.
Yep.
It was shouted in the wards when the night sister approached.
And from there, it bled into the broader culture.
Eventually forcing the polite editors of the Athenaeum literary magazine to formally define it for high society in 1919.
It is a remarkable linguistic journey.
We really have covered an incredible amount of ground today on this deep dive.
We definitely have.
We started all the way back in 1887 with Emil Berliner and his patent for mechanical gramophone that used a giant flaring metal horn to amplify vibration.
The root of the noise.
Then we moved into the deafening, crowded military barracks of World War I, where exhausted soldiers were forced to invent crude physical volume controls out of woolen socks.
A very creative solution.
We walked the aisles of a requisitioned orphanage turned trauma center with the 3rd London General Hospital, and eventually landed in the printed pages of London's literary elite.
And finally, the phrase settled firmly into our modern vocabulary.
Right. Completely divorced from the technology that created it, but carrying the exact same sense of absolute annoyance.
It definitely makes you view your own daily frustrations in a slightly different historical light.
It really does. So the next time you lose your patience, well, the next time a coworker is talking way too loudly on a Zoom call, or your friend simply will not stop singing a catchy commercial jingle and you finally snap and tell them to put a sock in it, take a second to appreciate what you were doing.
You're participating in history.
You aren't just using a random poetic idiom. You are directly channeling the ghost of an incredibly annoyed, completely exhausted World War I soldier who just wanted a moment of peace from a blaring metal horn.
It's a museum piece hidden right in our everyday complaints.
Exactly. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Okay.
We spent all this time establishing that put a sock in it. Managed to survive in our daily language for over a century. It completely outlived the actual physical gramophone technology it originally described.
Because absolutely no one today is looking for a large brass horn to stuff their gym socks into.
Right. So look around at the world today. What modern technology-based phrases are we using right now that will outlive their physical reality?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Like when you tell someone you are hanging up the phone?
Right, there's nothing to hang anymore.
Or you ask someone to rewind a video.
Mm.
Will people still be shouting those phrases 100 years from now?
They probably will.
Will they be entirely unaware of the archaic physical actions, like the aggressive slamming down of a plastic receiver, or the mechanical spinning of magnetic tape that those words originally described?
It's very likely.
Language is packed with the ghosts of obsolete technology if you just know how to listen for them. Keep an ear out.